Springer. Kelly, how are you? And I thought this is going to be an entrepreneur theme, because it's been really exciting what's been happening with Kelly's Choice and everything that we're going to get in some
Mhm.
entrepreneurial themes that really are going to hit home this week of batched interviews we're recording. But I'm really excited about our guest today.
I'm so excited as well. So I'm excited to have Paul Larsch is a brand specialist, author of The Divided Brain. I feel like again it goes along with what we were just talking about, and the powerful guide to understanding what really drives human decisions. He helps leaders tap into the emotional side of the brain and connect deeper, sell smarter, and build brands that truly stick. So welcome Paul to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to chatting.
Me too. Me too. So I think this is huge with the sell smarter. I feel like in this past week, we have figured out a little bit of a sell smarter approach, but I would love to hear how you go about doing that because I think the selling aspect is hard for entrepreneurship.
Well, absolutely. There's no doubt, and this book was primarily written from a necessity to help people who either are in marketing or in a startup position, not young entrepreneurs who are trying to put their finger on the pulse of what they think their customer may want. And what I'm trying to do here is to offer a simple hack that allows them to understand human behavior a little easier than uh, what happens when you have to go back to school and become a neuroscientist or a psychologist or something like that. So it's enough of a hack to allow people to understand how human behavior works. And that is key, particularly in a startup situation when you're putting out a new product or service and trying to connect with people. And in a
Mhm.
nutshell, the divided brain is really it's a metaphor, and it's just a metaphor of the brain being two interconnected gears. One I call the old brain, which is pretty much the part of the brain that we've had in shapes, forms, and since it goes back several hundred million years. Right to when animals first started getting any type of brain systems, and now that old brain looks after everything from our breathing to our heartbeat, all these things that we don't consciously think about. But also there's a lot of things in there that it does automatically, and one of them is it helps makes decisions. And then the new brain, which is the other gear, is really our more rational, the newer part of our brain that's been around, certainly in humans for, several 100,000 years, but we've really developed that prefrontal neocortex. And that part of the brain is the brain that rationalizes and often rationalizes decisions made in the old brain. So the point I'm trying to make in the book, and it doesn't matter if you're marketing or starting a new product, is you really have to make sure that you're going to talk about what your product or service, how it's going to make people feel, not necessarily
Okay.
all the facts and features. That comes in second. It's really you have to just make sure, and this is a common mistake I see entrepreneurs make, is that they want to lead with all the facts and figures and all these things that the new brain will digest. But really, if you don't convince the old brain that this is going to somehow make your life better in some shape, way, or form, particularly at an emotional level, even if they won't admit it, you're going to have trouble cutting through.
And that's what happens when you are leading with the wrong pitch.
Well,
Leading
so
with,
Absolutely.
Paul,
with
this is like literally the perfect time. And Neil, I think you're right on this. So can we can we do a working podcast today and to kind of talk about because I think this is huge and I
Mhm.
think you're right. I think we've been leading with the facts. Like we know that if you implement nutrition services, this
Mhm.
is like whatever. But how do I? So I was just in front of 12 superintendents last week, and I'm actually going to be in front of more tomorrow.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because they kept saying, like, well, how do you get behavior change? Or how do you? So if I were to have led with feeling, would that have connected more with them? And then also, what feeling is going to connect? So, like, what can I say that they're going to be like, that clicks into my
Mhm.
old brain?
Well, you're absolutely right, by the way. You have to figure that out, and it's not sometimes necessarily apparent what it's going to be. However, particularly if you're talking nutrition, where emotion can play a big part of that, because everything from the negative emotions of not having good nutrition in your diet, or why you don't stick with a certain process or system, to all of the good feelings of, if I get my nutrition under control, I'm going to feel better, I'm going to look better, and as a result, that's just going to elevate that part of that old brain that is very concerned with the way we're perceived in the world, what our social status and standing is. These are things that are really embedded into us from an evolutionary point of view. At one point, they really played an important factor in our evolution, particularly for survival of the fittest and so on and so forth. But in today's world, where we're bombarded with a fire hose of so much information and cross information and counter information, that it's hard for the old brain to decide what's real and what's not.
Hmm.
Right.
Well, now you really don't know what's real and what's not.
And that's where the
Yeah.
human behavior comes in, Paul, where I look at going back to my days in professional wrestling, where I
Mhm.
had to tell a story in a
Mhm.
match to make sure fans that didn't know me, because we weren't on TV at some places, and
Mhm.
tell a story when these fans didn't know me from Adam from the beginning, middle, and end. And that's how any sales presentation or any type of thing I look at specifically enough. What behavior am I looking to get out of this individual? What is their wants and needs? And listening is the mistake that a lot of people don't do. They don't
Mhm.
listen to find out what that consumer or business wants, so then you can present that human touch to show, well, this is how you're going to feel after. I'm
Mhm.
getting it. You're helping me in another part of this delivery process where
Mhm.
I get what they want, but I don't know how to get what they feel.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not readily apparent. Other times it's obvious. In the book, if you get through to the end of it, I offer what's called the brand value canvas, and it's an exercise. And there's actually an app that goes with it that you can use for free from my website. And it's a process that allows you to help disseminate what that target customer you have, what is going to make them feel, before you have to back it up with facts and figures. And in a nutshell, the way it works is that, and often I encourage, because we had a branding agency and we used to do it with clients, and we would do it in a workshop during a day. So we had a board, but the first thing we would talk about is the target customer. Who is this? Who are you going after? And obviously, to try to get as much information on who they are. And we'd often ask our clients because the clients, and this could be an entrepreneur, startup, or an established business. Sometimes they're not the best person to talk to about who they think their client is, because they're too close to it. You have to sometimes bring in clients, and we would encourage them, if they had relationships with certain clients, to bring them in to be part of this process, and other stakeholders as well, so that you get a well-rounded group. But in a nutshell, what we would do is we would talk about that customer, and we would divide things into three. The first one was, what are the factual things that your product or service are offering? What are the the numbers, and how are you going to deliver on them? Then we would look at, what are their pain points, and this is not pain points with regard to necessarily your product or service. This is just pain points when it comes to dealing with your categories. So if it was nutrition, what are the typical pain points that people run into when they're thinking of maybe talking to a nutritionist or trying an app or whatever it may be, because they're usually common, and that you will get from either doing some additional research, or it might come out organically from some of these customers. And then the third layer of that would be, what are these people? What are their hidden desires? We call them hidden desires because a lot of people just won't admit it, and because they're not really even consciously aware of it. But these are things that they really are hoping to get out of that. And again, with nutrition, it could be everything from just feeling better to being more attractive, so that they can feel that their self-esteem will go up, and that is something that they won't tell you necessarily, but that's certainly embedded into our DNA. And understanding that and accepting that allows you to then go, okay, let's take a look at our product. And we've divided that into 3 areas. Now, what are the factual services that we provide? How can we alleviate those pain points? And then third is how can we stimulate that hidden desire in terms of getting it across? And you mentioned, Neil, stories. Stories, we have a whole chapter on storytelling because that is a great way to do it. The old brain loves stories. We love myths. We're myth makers, and if you can position a story that has some emotional resonance, and where the customer may be the hero of the story, but you're the mentor or you're the
Right.
support act that's going to help them achieve their goals. That's very powerful, and that really opens up the old brain. And then you back it up with all these facts, because you do have all the facts behind you. You do have all of this, what you're going to do. And then the only third layer we throw on top of that is then we break it down and say, okay, how are you positioned in the marketplace against your competitors with regard to each one of these? Because if your competitors are doing exactly the same thing you want to do in terms of the way they're pitching it, it's going to be a lot more difficult to cut through. So we have some hacks in there as to how to make sure you're differentiating yourself from your competitors, and that requires a good competitive analysis. But really, if you can find that sweet spot that is going to separate you from your competitors, is going to make people feel better, even though they won't admit it, from a emotional point of view. And then you back that up with facts. You've pretty much given the brain everything it needs to make that buying decision, because the new brain it rationalizes. It wants to. That's what we do. We buy on emotion and we justify with facts. So you have to back it up with facts. You just can't make an empty promise, but you have to make that promise, that emotional promise, first.
100%. I was going to go with Kelly. That's the thing. We've had these conversations. I'm going to tell Kelly is a mentor of mine. So I'm just going to say this. She came to me when we first started the podcast saying, Neil,
Mm-hmm.
why aren't
Mm-hmm.
you using your network to be one of your service offerings for your agency?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't know, Kelly, what? Because Kelly, I guess you identified that was something that I had the talent of doing, is connecting people.
Mm-hmm.
So I added that to my agency, and it's absolutely helped tremendously, because now I don't have to go out and hunt. People come right to me. And I don't have to go the daily grind. Okay, I got to have all these cold calls this week of sales. I'm having people already willing and ready to buy. And it's because Kelly kind of brought that up, and it kind of gave me more and more of the understanding. And I just added as one of my offerings in my packages is as introductions. And I'm connecting all my guests to all my clients. And I've interviewed over 20,000 people, Paul. So I have a plethora of always influencers to connect my other clients. They might have never became a client of mine, but I have another offering.
Mm-hmm.
Then all these other opportunities came. And there you go. But that's the power of seeing the marketplace, learning. And that's part of that whole conversation. You probably tell marketers, tell people that are marketing their business, are you listening to other people? Kelly gave me a perspective about my business I never thought about, and it was a game changer.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a great example. And you're telling your audience this story, and that's exactly what I did. And one of the reasons I wrote the book is having been an entrepreneur, broadcaster, and owning an agency. One of the biggest challenges we always had with clients, and so we had some fairly large clients, was that how do you get over that hump of educating them on the subject? And that's where this book came from, is that we had a 90-minute education presentation with a slide deck and some exercises that we'd always do at the beginning of a workshop. And then once people said, yeah, that perfectly makes sense, I understand it now. So that's why I call it a hack, because we're talking about evolutionary psychology. We're talking about in neuroscience. We're talking about things that people don't necessarily read up on every day. So to give them a real quick crash course and to back it up with some books that they can go and read much more on if they really want to delve into it, because this is not an academic book. This is a practical book for people who are, like you say, entrepreneurs, startups, marketers who just want to say, okay, if I can just get the gist of how this works, then that'll give me an advantage, and it will. So that's where that book came from. Is people just kept on saying, hey, can I get more information on this? This is so good. Like you're having me look at my business a whole different way. And I want to make sure that I put everything through this lens.
I think it's truly perfect timing. We just had our team meeting right before this call, and
Mhm.
we're bringing on someone that's going to help us kind of pull everything in together. So, Paul,
Mhm.
my business is really interesting right now that we have, a book and the podcast and the speaking ability and the dietitians, and there's like
Mhm.
all of these moving parts, and I think that it's time to kind of pull it all together. We've been growing and building, and there's tons of content and this and that.
Mhm.
Um, and so this is where I think right now where we are with the GLP-1 space and weight loss space, there is a lot to say about how we feel.
Mhm.
And I think that if we kind of take that approach across all of those, it's going to make a huge, huge difference.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to put that at the forefront, I'm an angel investor as well. I probably into 12, 14 young startups now, and that's the common denominator is like, how is your product or service going to make me feel? And it doesn't
Feel.
matter what it is. It could be a software, it could be an actual physical product or service
Mhm.
for that matter. And that's usually when the eyes glaze a little bit and they go, well, I'm not sure how it makes you feel, but look at all the features it has. And well, that's great. I mean, you need the features. The product has to be good and stand on its own. But if you're not going to make an emotional connection with that old brain somehow, it's going to just be
Yeah.
very difficult for you to cut through.
Yep.
So, I mean, so kind of listening to you and understanding, I think that I see your evolution of where you're going with the book is you really want to see this opportunity for entrepreneurship. You want to see this
Hmm.
opportunity, and people just don't know where to start with marketing. And
Hmm.
because they watch a YouTube video or a TikTok and they think this is how I do it,
Hmm.
there's so much more. I love when you talk about competitive analysis, but let's go between blue ocean strategy
Hmm.
and red ocean strategy. What's better? What works better in your opinion?
Well, I mean, listen, it's great to just take the limits off, what you think you can accomplish in the world or do. There's nothing wrong with that. And that might be where the seed of an idea comes from. But I can tell you that, and this comes through as an angel investor more than even as an entrepreneur. I see, uh, I've seen hundreds of pitches, everything from 5 minute slide deck pitches for a new product to, half hour in-depth presentations for investors. And, often they miss the mark coming right out of the chute. And, what happens is a lot of these decks look the same. But what I came to learn really quickly is that honestly, almost everybody has a really good idea. The idea itself or the concept idea is sound. It's going to be how are you going to connect that to the customer and turn that into something that's going to be profitable? And that is the hardest thing to do. It's not the ideas. There's some tons of great ideas out there, and that was one of my mistakes as I started out in angel investing. Is every idea I heard went, that's a fantastic idea, and I'd invest in it. But then I found out when they started putting their marketing and together and the direction they were going, that they just weren't able to they weren't able to sell it. It wasn't able to connect with their target customers, and that cost me some money, even though the idea itself was never the issue. It was the execution. And so again, that's selfishly where I thought this book could help some people too. So anytime I'm talking to a potential, startup that I might look at investing in, I'm going to make sure that they read my book first, and that or at least I get the sense that they understand what I'm talking
Right.
about.
Hmm. No, it's hard. I mean, it really is hard because,
Hmm.
um, you know, not everyone can know every single part And that's where I think with entrepreneurship, you are wearing so many different hats and trying to be the marketer and trying to be the QuickBooks expert and also trying to be whatever you are in your own industry. And I know as a startup ourselves, like we didn't have the money to invest in getting
Mhm.
someone who, a chief marketing officer who
Mhm.
understood all of it. So we probably spun our wheels, for the past decade, just, not really getting out there in the best way. Timing's everything too. I mean, I think right now is more the time for nutrition than it was 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Totally is. There's
Totally.
timing. There's
Yeah.
timing, Kelly, and that's as entrepreneurs we have to understand. We have to stay the course, keep
Mhm.
doing what we're great at, and then wait till it happens. And when it happens, it
Mhm.
happens. And you if you study the stories, Paul, that's what happens. So you got to keep doing it, keep becoming better, and understand it happens when it happens, and you just got to be
Well,
ready.
you're helping me sell my book because again, I have a chapter in there that just talks about, how you do have to stay the course. You have to be consistent. I mean, this is assuming it's built on the right foundation, where you are talking to the new brain first, and you're backing it up. Once you have that, then this does require patience, and this is where, frankly, a lot of businesses do make mistakes, is they don't have the patience to see it through, and just sometimes when this thing is going to start to make tractions, they decide to make changes to whatever they're doing, and that just sets you back several steps. And I use
Mhm.
examples from, I always tell people, like, never change your logo or, some of your imaging unless you really necessarily have to, unless you've had a catastrophic thing that's happened to your brand and you have to pretty much dump it and start over. Those things they're just starting to resonate with the old brain. They found a position in the old brain, and clients will say, well, we want to redo everything. We just want to refresh. Well, a refresh is fine if you just want to maybe update some colors a little bit and so on and so forth, or be subtle, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because that is equity that you've built in your potential target customer that you're just throwing away. And
Totally.
I use a bunch of examples of brands that have tried to make changes, just for the sake of making changes, and it's cost them handsome,
Oh, some
it's
of the
cost them a lot of
branding
money.
decisions people make. Oh my gosh. So, what do you see as your secret sauce in your agency, Paul? When you still have the agency?
No, actually, I'm totally retired now. That's one of the things that allowed me to be free and do this.
Love
just
it.
just to have the time to do it.
Yeah.
But I would say really our secret sauce was that we did this education piece, and I've spoken at many conferences about this, and it's always resonated. And I talk in the book about many stories of having people consider this. It really started. I owned radio stations earlier in my career and worked in radio. And when you own a radio station, particularly in a smaller market, um, your only source of revenue is advertising. And so our customer is really, we had two customers. We had the listener, but we also had the advertiser, and we had to keep both of them happy. But if the advertiser wasn't getting results, they weren't going to do business with you. And we had competition like every other business. So we really, really worked hard to make sure that we helped our clients get results.
Mm.
And that's where the seed of all of this happened. And we'd go to them and say,
Mm.
listen, you have to talk. I use an example of, we had a car dealership, or sorry, not a car dealership, but a mechanic that opened up in our local market. And he had all of this brand new technology in his garage that he really wanted to push. And we really, took us a while, but we convinced him not to do that and say, listen, no, that's great, but that's not going to connect emotionally. So a long story short, because he worked with his wife, they worked together in this thing, is that we just had an interplay between them where she wanted to get her car fixed by Ted, and Ted was always too busy because he was looking after, the paying customers first. So they even came ahead of his wife. So it was this banter back and forth about how committed they are to the customer. And then we would, throw in some of this stuff of the features they had. And his business grew exponentially over 20 years. And it's just one of the examples we use of, small market clients that, and this was before social media and all these other things that we can use to amplify this, just using that message of, and then, but sticking with the same message for 20 years. And people
Mhm.
knew how the commercials were going to end, Ted fixes everybody's car except Benita's because the the customer comes first. So um, there's tons of examples like that. And I really learned this when I worked in Toronto with the Toronto Blue Jays and the Maple Leafs, which are in Canada here, two of our biggest sports franchises. And we did the radio broadcast for them. And it was
Oh, wow.
syndicated all across the country. And we were working with, the big advertisers, the car companies, the beer companies. And I always remember, the head of marketing for Labatt's. This is back in the '90s. Labatt's beer, and I'm sure a lot of our American friends even know what Labatt's beer is.
Yes.
But it was like people, he always said, people don't buy our beer on the type of hops it has.
Right.
They buy it really on the identity and belonging. There's only four ingredients in beer. There's water, yeast, hops, and grain, and that's it. There's nothing else, and it's just a mixture of how you put those together that will give the beer flavor. So everything else has to be really about what's the identity. Like if you drink this type of beer, how's that going to make you feel? What's
All
that
right.
identity?
All right.
And the car dealers as well. It was always, they never talked about the horsepower or the this and that. It was always, the feeling of driving
Yeah.
that
I,
car down the road. And
I,
and then if it was and
mhm.
you just conveying that emotional feeling that people feel. And that's the old brain, which again, the old brain doesn't speak to us, it's subconscious, but it can totally relate to that.
Paul, you're amazing. Where can people pick up your book?
You any bookstore, Barnes and Noble. It's Amazon, of course, and it's hopefully available close to you.
All right. Sounds good. We appreciate it, Paul.
Thanks,
Kelly, go to
Paul.
kellyschoice.org and pick up your book, Kelly. What's your
Yeah,
book?
you can find it right on Amazon, The New Weight Loss Era. And really excited. I'm going to put this right into place. I made tons of notes, literally, Paul, while we were speaking. I was
Mm,
writing down things I'm going to get to my marketing team and get this book. So I hope everyone
okay.
else does too. And thank you so much for your
All
time.
right.
Oh, for
That was
sure.
a
And just a final plug, you can go to paullarche.com. So it's LARCHE is so it's paullarche.com. And that's it's all on the book. So there's links there to buy it, but there's more information on what it's all about if your interest is being tweaked.
all right. That was a
Wonderful.
special